Okay, it's 6 guys. We'll start. Firstly, hello, good evening everyone. Right, welcome back to your own channel Scholars, and I'm hoping everybody had a good day, right? I know it's midweek, it might be exhausting to some of you considering that you all told me that you all have exams and all, but I'm hoping everybody is doing good in your exams, right? Anyways, so okay, a couple of y'all are already here. Good evening, Ria. Hi, Shrestha. Cool. So we'll just give it a couple of seconds for other people to join. In the meantime, in the meanwhile, without wasting any time, we'll just do the introduction part, right? So, welcome learners. I'm Nikitha, as most of you already know me, and I'm the history educator here at Unacademy's Scholars channel. And I take classes for standard 11th and 12th. Since it's Wednesday today, it's the 12th standard class, right? And a little bit about my educational qualifications, as you keep asking. I have graduated from Ashoka University with a bachelor's degree in history and also a minor in political science, right? Okay, and quick update about the Telegram channel. The link for joining the Telegram channel, which is called as Scholars, is in the description below of this video. If you haven't joined already, go click on the link and join the Telegram channel, because that is quite helpful for you to know what is happening on the YouTube channel, right? So be it any updates, be it some sort of information, or like cancelling of classes, postponing of classes, whatever the situation is, you'll get an update about it on the Telegram channel. So I urge you all to join it, for which the link is in the description below. And okay, so again, another quick update. There's a particular scholarship test which is conducted by Unacademy called as Emerge, going on for U12 standard students, right? So these are like free live mock tests and are conducted every week. And as far as this week is concerned, they're being conducted from 25th of September to 28th of September, right? So you can you can actually enroll for these tests and attempt them. That will be like a practice for your CBSE term 1 examinations, right? So even for this Emerge thing, the link is in the description below. Go have a look at it, go read the guidelines, and also enroll yourselves quickly. Okay, so we'll just quickly run through what the Unacademy Plus features and subscriptions are. As far as Unacademy Plus features are concerned, you can actually listen to some of the live classes taught by top educators of India, all available on one single platform. And there's also accessibility for you to practice tests and also live test series, along with regular doubt clearing sessions and answer writing sessions. There's exhaustive coverage of syllabus, so you don't really have to worry about missing out on a particular topic. There's mentorship given to you, there's guidance given to you, along with access to certain other study materials which are in the form of PDFs, which you can later refer to for any queries or doubts you have. And if you move on to the subscription pricing for Plus, the prices are up on the screen, right? There are six variations to this, which is a 3-month subscription, 9-month, 12-month, 15-month, 18 and 24-month. The prices are up. You can have a look at them and subscribe to whichever one you want according to your feasibility. But the little hack here is the longer period of time you actually take a subscription for, the more beneficial it's going to be, right? In terms of saving a couple of bucks for yourself. And yeah, so moving on to Iconic. Here the features are a little bit better and greater when compared to Unacademy Plus. As in, you'll get personal mentorship, there are live doubt solving sessions, There are weekly reports provided to you based on your last week's performance, right? So you'll be assessed every week on your quizzes and stuff. So you'll know where you stand and which areas to improve on. And there's a direct parent connect along with study planners being provided. And for this, the durations for the subscriptions are the same, just like Unacademy Plus, but the pricing might vary a little bit. Again, clearly the prices are up on the screen. You can have a look at them and go ahead with whichever one you feel comfortable, right? And lastly, before going to the actual topic for today, let me just tell you that there is some kind of special content you can actually unlock or like access on the Unacademy Learning app, right? These are special classes, but it's free content. So the procedure to access them is you have to first download the Unacademy Learning app from the Google Play Store and then log into the app with proper credentials and then select your goal. Like your goal is like 12th standard history and other subjects, right? And then there's on the top left corner in the menu button, there's a option called special. Click on that. It'll ask you for a code, right? You can use my code, which is TUM10, right? And then you will be able to access the free content, right? Cool. So okay, before moving forward, hello to everybody who joined right now. Okay, Shiva has a question. History BA first year. Shiva, again, like just to give you a heads up as to how the undergraduate works in India, like the syllabus or the material varies from university to university, right? So I can't really suggest you like one particular standard book which kinds of gives you insight into what Indian history will look like, because honestly it will differ from university to university. If you go to DU, it might be something else, or if you go to JNU, it might be something else, right? It depends on what the professor wants the syllabus to be. So in order to answer that question, there is no definite answer, but like if you're looking to gain knowledge on the Indian history per se, right? If that is what you're looking for, then I can suggest you like 3 books to go look at, right? One is Ancient India by R.S. Sharma. I think most of you all are aware of these books, like these 3 standard books which talk about ancient, medieval and modern, right? R.S. Sharma, Satish Chandra and Bipin Chandra. So you can go through these 3 books to give you like brief or like detailed insights as to how the Indian history operated. So yeah, I hope that helps. Cool. Okay, Ayush is here. Hi Ayush. Okay then, it's already 6:10. Without further ado, let's dive straight into the topic. So today we'll be starting off the lesson by talking about Veera Shaivism, right? This particular tradition emerged within Karnataka, and very honestly speaking, it never crossed Karnataka borders, right? It was only specific to that particular Karnataka region, right? So what is this Veerashaiva tradition and who was the founder? When was it founded? We'll answer all these questions in this slide, right? So to be very specific, this Veerashaiva tradition came up in 12th century CE, right? In the 12th century CE, in the Karnataka region, there was a famous personality called as Basavana, right? The spelling for that is right here, Basavana, or sometimes it is Vanna, right? Irrespective of the spelling, his name is Basavana, right? He was actually a Brahmana. That might be quite surprising to you because being a Brahmana, he opposed Brahmins, but nevertheless the fact remains that he is a Brahmin, right? So he was the founder of this new movement called Veera Shaivism, which emerged in the 12th century CE in Karnataka, right? So just to give you information as to when did Basavana, when was he born or when did he die? He was born in 1106 CE, right? The start of the 12th century. And then he almost lived for around like 62 years, and then he died in 1168, right? Okay, so the identities attached to him are, firstly, he was born into a Brahmin family, right? So by birth he was a Brahmin, and then he took up Jainism, right? Like he started following Jainism. He started believing in the principles of Jaina religion, right? Some days he followed Jainism, but then he thought that no, that his thoughts are not aligning with the Jaina philosophy, and then he founded the Veerashaiva tradition, right? But before Jainism, before following Jainism and after following Jainism and before actually finding this new sect called Veerashaivism, there's a particular time in his life where he did not follow any religion, like he did not believe in any principles, right? He was a very civil man and joined as a court member, as a court minister in one of the Chalukya king courts, right? So those days in the 12th century, Chalukya kingdom was one of the very powerful kingdoms which was ruling in the Karnataka and like Deccan Plateau region, right? He joined as a minister, right? So rough events you have to remember is just like a conclusion of whatever we've seen till now. Born to a Brahmin family, after a couple of days adopted Jainism, like he followed Jainism for a little bit. Next, he did not believe in anything, instead worked as a minister in the court of a Chalukya king. The fourth event you have to remember is his founding of the Veerashaiva tradition, right? So remember those four events, right? Okay. No, Ayush, you might be slightly mistaken there. He was actually born a Brahmin, right? And then a Jaina, if I'm not wrong. Okay, that kind of confused me right now, but like, okay, I'll get back to you on that because as far as I remember, he was like a Brahmin and then a Jaina. But I'll get back to it by the end of the class, right? Yeah, so basically he was the founder of Veerashaiva tradition, right? So his followers were known as Veerashaivas, right? So whoever followed Basavanna were called as Veerashaivas, and literally if you translate Veerashaivas, it means heroes of Shiva, right? So by this what you inferring? That they believed in the Lord Shiva, right? Or like not just Veerashaivas, but they also had another name called Lingayats, right? The spelling is here, it's Lingayats, Lingayats. And the literal meaning of Lingayats is wearers of the Linga, right? Okay, it literally means wearers of the Linga, right? Okay, Linga doesn't necessarily have to be in these huge stone sculptures, right? It can be as small as which will fit into your hand, or like which is the size of your finger or something like that. There are small lingas also. So what they used to do is, if you see the last point here, you will understand why they are called the wearers of linga, right? So not just men but also women who used to follow this tradition, both of them, like both men and women, they used to insert this small linga into a silver case, right? So, and they used to hang it around their left shoulder, right? So even they're sleeping, they're doing any kind of work in the daytime, they're eating, irrespective of whatever they're doing, always that linga has to be on their body, like they are wearing the linga just like they're wearing clothes, right? So Lingayats literally translates to wearers of linga. Got it? Right. So just to give you like another point, Lingayats even today, if you go to the Karnataka region even today, they are very, very important. Like they hold such significance. The community as a whole is so important, like even today, right? Just to give you a picture as to what that linga inserted in a silver loop looked like, it was exactly this. Like this is a male member who followed Veerashaiva's tradition, and Okay, I'm not sure if y'all can zoom into the picture, but this is the thing I'm talking about, right? So there's like a thread, and onto the thread they used to attach this linga, which is embedded in a silver coating, right? And they used to hang it onto their body, and especially towards the left shoulder, not the right. This might be in the picture, looks like as if towards the right side of the body, but the thread it is coming from is from the left shoulder, right? It's coming from here. So it's like a tradition that it has to be only from the left side, right? Okay, so this is a female figure which also shows the same thing. This is the linga again. She's attaching it to the left side of the body, right? Okay. Cool. Okay, Ayush has a point. It's no more Chalukya, now it's Kala Chori. Oh, okay, yeah, Ayush, I kind of knew that, but like I didn't want to use the word Kala Chori because I thought y'all might not be familiar with it, right? Because it's a very recent change, right? So yeah, it's Kala Chori / Chalukya, whichever you want to call it. By the way, thanks Ayush for that point. Um, cool. So guys, I'll just keep moving ahead with the slides because we have a lot to cover from this chapter. But if y'all have any queries or doubts in between, don't hesitate to interrupt me. Like keep posting your questions, right? I will answer them at the end of every slide. Cool. So under the Veerashaiva tradition itself, there were some popular people. Like the founder is Basavanna, and there are few followers which follow Veerashaiva tradition. But in between them, there are some Veerashaiva monks, right? They used to wander from place to place and spread the message of Veerashaivism, but within Karnataka itself, right? So these people officially were called as Jangamas, right? The spelling is here. It's Jangama. They are very respected by the Veerashaiva community, and they are called as Jangamas. Just to give you like analogy as to what their position is within the religious structure, briefly compare it to like bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, right? Like within the Buddhist religion, the position that the bhikkhus and bhikkhunis had, it is exactly similar to the position of Jangama in the Veerashaiva tradition, right? I hope people got the analogy. Right, so we look at some of the philosophies which Lingayats believed in, right? They believed that after the death, like after a human dies, like if he's a devotee of Veerashaivism, like follower of Veerashaivis tradition, that particular devotee will be united with Shiva and will never return back to the world. So what are they believing in here? That, you know, like it's quite contrary to the Hindu philosophy or like the Brahmanical way of functioning. So I'll just give you both the philosophies. That will make the point very clearer, right? So let's just first look at Brahmanical way of burying or treating the dead, right? If it comes to Brahmanical religion, you always come across the fact that they never bury the dead body, but in fact burn it, right? Like burning or cremating is like the official term, technical term. They always cremate the bodies. But if you look at Lingayats, they never burn the bodies, but they bury the body, right? So what does like cremating or burning the body signify, right? According to the Hindu practice or according to the Brahmanical traditions, the soul and body, right? There is one body, there is one soul, but that particular soul will reside in any body, right? If it leaves body number 1, right, after the person is dead, the body will be burnt. So because of the cremation, the soul will set itself free, and then it will be in a capacity to go and sit in somebody else's body, right? So soul can jump from one body to another, and the way the soul can be freed from the existing body is by cremation. So that was the significance behind burning a body. But when it comes to Lingayats, they believe that there is a lot of interconnectedness between the body and the soul, right? If once a body dies, that is it. The soul will directly go to the God. It will be united with the God, but it will not go to any other body, right? So that point is clear. So that is why they always buried the dead, but they never burnt them, right? I hope this is clear. The ritual traditions followed, right? Yeah, so okay, I've covered these 2 points. Looking at this, right? Um, so clearly by now you must have understood that they are not prescribing the cremation process mentioned as a part of Shastras. So that basically means that they are against the Brahmanical tradition, right? We have established that point, that it's Lingayats versus Brahmins, right? Lingayats always opposed Brahmins and their ideologies. In the same manner, they also challenged the idea of caste, right? They were like, we don't believe in caste. Everybody is the same, right? God will protect everybody who will believe in Shiva. Shiva will protect everybody who will believe in him, right? So there's no caste system or something like that. That they challenge the caste system. And also when it comes to like pollution attributed to certain groups, right? Like we've come across these untouchables or even Shudra castes who used to perform all these polluted activities, like dealing with the dead bodies or dealing with dead animals and all that stuff. So that is why they were treated as polluted, right? So Lingayats were against this concept of pollution also, right? Cool. So again, these are just some of the philosophies we're talking about, the Veera Shaiva tradition, or like what they believe in, right? So yeah, exactly, Ayush. They call us Chandalas, right? Like I think in chapter 2 or 3 we've come across this term called Chandalas, where they were basically untouchables dealing with dead and all that stuff. Cool. So the next philosophy of Veerashaiva tradition is that they question the theory of rebirth. Exactly the point I was mentioning, right? As soon as you die, they believe that the soul went and united with the God, united with Shiva. If that is the case, how will a person be reborn? Simple question, right? That is the philosophy they believed in, and therefore questioned the theory of rebirth as described by the Brahmanical traditions. Yeah, so okay, how did they gain followers, right? It was a relatively new tradition, right? It was founded just in the 12th century. In that case, there needs to be some procedure, or there needs to be some unique point which is going to attract the followers, right? Very simple again. If you look at the Brahmanical social order, so many people are being humiliated, especially people from the lower castes, right? They're not being respected, they're being looked down upon, right? They're not even looked at as like proper human beings, always humiliated, right? So obviously they wouldn't feel safe in such a place, right? So that is when people actually started looking for alternatives, right? Low caste people started looking for something else, and that is when they came across this tradition called Veerashaivism, and Veerashaivism supported all these communities. So obviously they would find a safe and secure place within the Veerashaiva tradition, and quickly they changed from Brahmanical way of life to Veerashaiva tradition, right? So that is how this particular new tradition gained so many followers. Cool. Okay, so I used to answer your questions. I'll talk in brief, in detail about what vachanas means in the next couple of slides. But just a point of clarification here, vachanas were actually composed by Jangamas, right? Mostly Basavanna composed them, but there are a few Jangamas who composed vachanas, right? And Lingayats are the people who used to follow them. Like Lingayats is a term which is given to every person who follows Veerashaiva's tradition, right? So the point of distraction here is every Jangama is a Lingayat, right? Okay, just hold on for a second. Yeah, I'm clear. Every Jangama is a Lingayat, but every Lingayat cannot be a Jangama, right? You got the point here? Because Jangamas are just those special people. Special people as in like some monks belonging to Veerashaiva tradition, right? So briefly to answer your questions, Jangamas wrote Vachanas and Lingayats followed them, right? I hope that's clear. Cool. So where were we, right? Yeah, so we discussed this point, how it attracted so many followers, especially from the marginalized communities. So if you look at the next point here, the Lingayats also encouraged certain practices which were opposed by Dharma Shastras. Again, straight up challenging Brahminical order, right? They're very upfront about this. They literally kind of hated Brahmins, na? It kind of looks like that. They literally kind of hated Brahmins and their way of life. So yeah, they also challenged other practices mentioned in Dharma Shastras. You know, like Dharma Shastras say that post puberty you're not supposed to marry, but Lingayats say that the marriage is your own personal thing. You can marry whenever you want, right? And also like remarriage of widows, right? It's strictly prohibited within the Brahminical community, within Brahminical tradition. But Lingayats again said that no, there's nothing like that. Even widows can remarry again, right? So these are some of the traditions that they encouraged. And lastly, if you look at this point, our understanding of the Veerashaiva tradition is derived from Vachanas, right? Exactly the point Ayush was referring to. Vachanas were basically these compositions written majorly by Basavanna himself when he was alive, and after he was dead, his followers, called as Jangamas, right? They wrote some of the Vachanas. Vachanas are nothing but like rules or regulations or like some good words or compositions, right? You get the point, right? Like these are some literary sayings of the tradition itself. These make the tradition unique, right? Yeah, so mostly they were composed in Kannada because as we have seen, it's kind of restricted to Karnataka itself, where the language widely spoken was Kannada back then and even now. Like there was no discrimination between gender, so both men and women men and women can be Jangamas, and both of them wrote Vachanas, right? And yeah, so the kind of information we get about the Veerashaiva tradition right now, right, for us the main source is Vachanas, right? Yeah. Any questions till here, guys? Because I think that briefly brings us to the end of Veerashaiva tradition. Cool. I'm hoping everything is clear till here. Okay, it's clear. Cool. So we'll have a quick look at source 4, right? This is basically one of the Vachanas composed by Basavanna. They're very easy to understand, to be very honest. They're in a very simplistic language. Even if a normal layman would go, like if you know Kannada obviously, even if like a normal layman would go and read that text, it was very easy for them to understand. Very simple language, right? So the source 4, titled as Rituals and the Real World in your textbook, right? So from here the Vachana starts. It was written by Basavanna. He says that okay, basically the they here are Brahmins, right? They're writing against Brahmins here. When Brahmins see a serpent is a snake, right? If they see a serpent carved in a stone, they pour milk on it. This tradition is followed even now in the 21st century, right? Hindus, whenever they go to the temples, if they see a serpent carved in a stone, right, they usually pour milk onto it, right? I think there's a special festival also dedicated to this tradition, right? Yeah, but at the same time, if they come across a real serpent, which is like a living serpent, they say kill and kill, right? They just can't stand the fact that there's a live snake in front of them. They're very afraid of it. They obviously like they make a huge ruckus out of it. Like somebody kill it, like somebody make it go away or something like that, right? So that's like a contradiction. You're going somewhere and offering milk, like buying it, offering milk and wasting the milk by pouring it on a stone. But at the same time, if you see a real serpent, you're telling kill it. And that is like a contradiction, right? He looks at another contradiction also. He says, to the servant of God who could eat, like he's basically referring to any human being who could eat, right? If they come and beg for food, people are going to say, like, no, we don't have anything, just go away, we don't have anything to offer you. But at the same time, people themselves voluntarily will go to the image of a god, like who is not even a living thing, who can't eat, and offer like enormous quantities of food, right? Again, that's a contradiction in itself. You're not willing to give food to somebody who is living and who can actually eat, but you're willing to offer food to a stone or like a statue or like an image of god which cannot eat, and obviously the food is wasted, right? So these are all like basic humanitarian values, right? So he's completely against the Brahmanical way of life. He's saying what is this contradiction? Like by saying all these things, he's trying to lure the audience. He's trying to convince the audience to follow Veerashaiva tradition and to oppose Brahmanism. He's like, don't follow all this. It doesn't make any sense. You yourself look at the contradictions, right? Do you really think it is a human way of living? No, it's not. So come and join Veerashaiva tradition. That is exactly the words that Basavanna used to use to convince the people to come and join Veerashaiva tradition, right? Okay, cool. So this source in itself should make the philosophy of Veerashaiva tradition clear to you guys, right? This is that one encompassing slide. Okay. So that was like the end of Veerashaiva tradition. We'll now look at new religious developments that were happening alongside the development of Veerashaivism in that period, right? We'll be majorly looking at two major developments. The first one is we've talked about the merging of religions, if you all remember, a couple of days back, right? A couple of sessions back. That is exactly what is happening in the 12th century also, right? We've looked at this Tamil Bhaktas, right? Nayanars and Alvars, like basically followers of Vaishnavism and Shaivism. We've looked at them in the last class, right? So in the 12th century, what was happening is these Tamil Bhaktas, especially Vaishnavas, which are Alvars, right? So especially Vaishnavas, they were being incorporated into the Sanskritic tradition, which is basically the Brahmanical way of life, right? Again, this culmination is happening, this merging is happening. This is one religious development. So that already happened, like Tamil merged into Sanskritic traditions. And what was the result of it was the composition of one of the best known Puranas, known as the Bhagavata Purana, right? There are n number of Puranas, as we know, written over several centuries. So Bhagavata Purana was one such Purana which was written because of the merge of Vaishnavism with the Sanskritic tradition, right? So that was one religious development. And the other religious development is the second one is we find development of traditions of Bhakti in Maharashtra, right? Till now we've only looked at places like Tamil Nadu or Karnataka because traditions were coming up only in these places. But from the 13th century, right, even in Maharashtra, so many religious leaders were coming up, just like Basavanna, right? And new traditions were coming up in the state of Maharashtra as well. So, yeah, so those were like two notable points. Okay. Okay, Rafat joined us. Hi, Rafat. Not a problem. You can just go back and listen to the recorded lecture, right? Cool. Okay, we'll move on to the next subtopic of your textbook, which is religious ferment in North India. Whatever we've been talking, like Alvars, Niners, Veerashaivism, all these are specific to the South Indian land, right? Now, in the same time, like at the same time, we look at what was happening in the northern part of the subcontinent, right? So, yeah, like even in the northern part, Vaishnavism was there, Shaivism was there. It was thriving just like it was happening in the southern part of the Indian subcontinent. So many temples were coming up, right? And the same concept basically. Temples were coming up. They relied on the rulers to build temples, right? Rulers often funded for the construction of these temples. Grand decor, great sculptures, right? Nice wall paintings. Same philosophy. The same thing was happening in the northern part of India itself. However, historians have not found evidence of anything like the new traditions that were coming up, right? Like, as in, the Brahmanical way is there, but there are traditions like Veera Shaivism in the south, which were coming up in opposition to the Brahmanical way of life, right? That was happening in the southern part. But if you come to the northern part, you do not find anything like that, right? You do not find any tradition which was coming up which is opposing the Brahmanical traditions. What does this basically mean? That Brahmins were the dominating class in the northern part of India till a particular time, right? So that was the difference between what was happening in the south and the north, right? uh, Again, Ayush, like we just can't really decide like which slide is important, which slide is not, because again the patterns change. You really don't know from which part of the textbook he's going to ask you questions. Like the board is going to ask you questions, right? So you need to be prepared for every page and every topic, right? So considering that, just don't be like this might not be important and therefore I won't prepare. What if it is important, or like what if a question comes up from that, right? So yeah, and especially it was a source box, right? I was telling you how important the source boxes are in terms of the examination point of view. So yeah, just go through them. Cool. Okay, so we look at the reason as to why the opposing traditions were not coming up, right? So just to give you like a brief historical context, at this time there were several Rajput states. When you hear the word Rajput, immediately you have to, like, one thing which has to come to your mind is that Rajputs, Brahmins, right? Rajputs like were heavily influenced by Brahmins, right? They supported Brahmins. Like they followed the Brahmanical way of life, right? So whenever I refer to Rajput states, just that Brahman way of life should come to your mind, right? Yeah, so this was exactly the time where several Rajput states were coming up in the northern part of India, right? And as I was telling you, Brahmins holded a very, very important position in the Rajput states, not just in terms of performing ritual functions. Like generally, we associate Brahmins with religion, right? They were just used to perform so many rituals, like some yagnas, some yagas, some random pujas, and all that stuff. That is there in the Rajput states. But along with that, Brahmins were also involved in a range of secular functions. That is like a lot of involvement, right? Because we can see so many Brahmins occupying so many what do you say, like court positions, right? Like often they became ministers in the courts of the kings. They were like advisors to the king in terms of political affairs, in terms of social affairs, and all that stuff. So in every aspect of life, like cultural way, religious way, political, social, economic, in every way of life, you can see a dominating presence of Brahmins in the Rajput states, right? So this basically tells us, or like one point you're supposed to infer from this is the domination of Brahmins in Rajput states, right? So establishing that fact, we don't really see any opposition coming up against the Brahmins or like challenging their position, right? Obviously, because Brahmins were so dominant, even if there are small traditions coming up, they wouldn't stand a chance in front of such huge influence, right? So yeah, that is why there are no traditions coming up. Simple answer to that. But just to make it a multi-layered argument, right, we look at some other points, and right, so okay, to be very honest, there are some small traditions which are coming up, right? For example, communities like Naths, Jogis and Siddhas, right? They're on the screen here, Naths, Jogis and Siddhas. These were coming up in opposition to Brahmanical way of life within the Rajput states. But again, as I was saying, they are very, very small in number. They are a minority. And they obviously couldn't stand against such dominant forces like Brahmins, who were very excessively supported by the kings themselves. Right? Kings and Brahmins were one here. So obviously such small traditions like Naths or Jogis cannot confront or cannot challenge kings plus Brahmins, right? Yeah. So also like the social context of who these Naths or Jogis were, they were basically from artisanal groups, right? If you come across the term artisanal group or something like weavers, etc., we usually associate it with some lower caste or which did not have any significance, but that is not the case here in the 13th century, because the the artisan groups in itself, right, the weavers, potters or some other kind of artisanal groups, they were gaining a lot of importance within in the 13th century because of the organized craft production, because there is demand for trade, because people in other regions are demanding these crafts, right? Especially people in Central Asia and West Asia, they are buying a lot of artist works, right? Like like be it anything, any kind of artist works, there was a demand for it in the Central Asian and West Asian markets, right? So that is how slowly these communities began to develop, and they formed like a organized craft organizations, right? So they were gaining a lot of importance, and these are the communities from which all these Jogis and Naths came up, right? But even though they are powerful socially, right, we've just talked about the social importance of artisanal groups. Yeah, agreed, they had a good social standing in the society, economically they might be wealthy, but again they could not stand in front of the Brahmins. Yes, agreed, they questioned the authority of the Vedas, they questioned Brahmins, like they tried to gather the support of the people, like the local people, by expressing themselves in local languages, right? Because that way there would be a connect between them and the local people, right? They gained to like they tried to gain the followers, they in fact questioned the Vedas, like they did whatever they can in their capacity, right? They did, but again they could not win the king or the ruling elite, right? So see, one dynamic you're supposed to understand here is there are Brahmins, right? And on the other side there are all these groups like Siddhas and all these artisan groups, right? So Brahmins and people opposing Brahmins, two categories, right? Okay, I'll get back to Aisha's question in a minute, but let me just explain this first, right? Brahmins and Siddhas, these are religious significance, right? These belong to the religious aspect. On the other side, as a political dominator, you have the position of a king or a ruler, right? In the Rajput states, king was heavily leaned towards Brahmins, right? Kings supported Brahmins, they gave them positions within their courts and all that stuff. Now, in order for king to support siddhas and other kind of yogis and all that stuff, they need to lure the king somehow and you manipulate the king, you somehow convince him, do whatever you want. But your ultimate goal is to make the king lean towards you, right? They tried to do it. Siddhas and yogis tried to win the support of the ruling elite, which was the king, but they were not successful, right? The point being, even though they tried, even though they challenged the Brahmanical supremacy, they were not successful in doing so, right? You got the point? Okay, so Ayush has two questions here. The first one is, at that time long distance trade was important. Yes, Ayush, absolutely. Like, in fact, like after the advent of Muslims, especially, right? Not into the India, but like while the Islamic tradition was growing in the 7th, 8th centuries, that is exactly the time when the international trade peaked. So much of export, so much of import was happening at a very great scale, like into the subcontinent and also from the subcontinent, right? Yes, just to answer your question in one word, the answer is yes, right? It was important. Cool. So, and the next question he has is, why did they question Vedas? Again, like, why will you question Why will you question anything for that matter? Because you do not believe in that, or you think that that's wrong, or you just do not follow it, right? Just like Veerashaiva's tradition, right? Like, Basavanna didn't think that whatever rules are being mentioned as a Vedas were correct. Like, he was opposing them. Like, he did not believe in that philosophy. That is why he opposed Vedas and Brahmins. In the same manner, these yogis and siddhas as well, like, probably they didn't like the Brahmanical way of life. They thought that all these rituals slash yagnas and all that stuff, they're all these extravagant things, like wasting money, wasting time. I don't know, like, there might be like n number of factors, right, for you to oppose something. Yeah, so these like are some of the factors. Cool. Okay, so you got the answer for that basically. Cool. So yeah, the point I was mentioning is they couldn't lure the king in their favor, right? They tried, but they couldn't win. Yes. So, and then it was moving. We are in the 13th century right now, right? So at this point of time, when Rajput states were at their peak, Brahmins were super dominating. At this point of time, there was a new group of people coming into the Indian subcontinent as invaders, right? Who were they? They were called as Turks. They were coming from the present day Turkish land. So Turks came into the Indian subcontinent, and slowly they fought so many wars, and then finally they established the Delhi Sultanate in the 13th century. All of us know what the Delhi Sultanate is, right? The culmination of 5 different sultanates, right? Like Lodis, Sayyids, and like a couple of other, like basically there are 5 in number, right? So they came, they established their rule in the 13th century, right? And slowly, not just restricting themselves to the center, to their own capital, but they in fact started encroaching on the Rajput territories, right? All these Delhi Sultanate's people started invading Rajput states and conquering one by one. And that is how Rajputs slowly started losing their significance. If Rajputs lose their significance, obviously Brahmins also will lose their significance, because they are interconnected, right? Brahmins were solely dependent on Rajputs. So Rajputs are losing, means Brahmins are also losing, right? So that is how, because of Delhi Sultanate, not because of internal forces happening within India, but because of some external force which is called as Delhi Sultanate, the weakening of Brahmins and Rajputs was happening in the Indian subcontinent, right? Yeah, so now the dynamic is a little bit changed, right? Brahmins started losing importance, and obviously when they are losing importance, all these traditions will find a platform, like all these new traditions like yogis and siddhas, like obviously it's easier for them to come up as new traditions, right? Because now they can easily oppose Brahmins. And yes, it is true that yogis, siddhas and all of them came up in the 13th century when the Delhi Sultanate established itself. And not just that, right? Now there was also some other significant change which was happening, which is the coming of the Sufis, right? Again, Sufis is something which is very, very important as far as this chapter is concerned, and we will talk about them in very much detail, I think in next class, right? We don't have the scope to talk about it today, but we'll touch in very, very great detail about Sufis in the next class. But just hold on to the point that Sufis were actually the people who started coming in the 13th century as the Delhi Sultanate started expanding, right? And the other point is Brahmanical dominance was weakening, right? Okay, so that's the end of this slide. Cool. So now that we've started talking about Islamic traditions, right, or like the invasion of Delhi Sultanates, who were basically Muslims, right? So now we'll talk a little bit in detail about what the Islamic traditions were, or what is the scenario of the Indian subcontinent in the 13th century as far as Islam is concerned, right? So this is just going to be like an introduction to Islam, right? In the next class, we'll be talking in very detail about what it entails, right? So yeah, the next sub-theme is new strands in the fabric, which is Islamic traditions, right? Coming up of Islamic traditions. So yeah, so just to talk about like a certain aspect, just as the regions within the subcontinent were not isolated from one another, as in basically the first point is trying to make is there's a lot of connectedness, there's a lot of interactions happening within the Indian subcontinent itself. Just like that, this interaction was not just restricted within the subcontinent, but it also just went beyond the seas and mountains, right? Basically saying international connections. It's not something new to the 13th century. It was there for almost a millennium, not 1 millennium, but like so many, for like so many millenniums now. The connectedness between people from one land to the other was always there, right? So because of this background, right, people from Arab, like to be very specific, merchants from Arab Arabia, right? So they frequently visited the western coast in the first millennium CE, right? If you have like a rough idea of world map in your mind, right, Arabs, or like Central Asian people for that matter, are towards the west side of the Indian subcontinent, right? So whoever are trading with the Indian people via the sea route, or via like the water bodies, they had to come and unpack their cargo on the western coastline, right? Starting from Gujarat, right? Like in Gujarat you have that Surat port, and then there's I don't know, like Konkan coastline, and then there's Kochi. So all these are west side ports, right? So trade used to happen between Arab merchants and the Indian people via the western coast in the first millennium CE. And just like that, Central Asian people did not have to go through the water routes. They were directly connected with the Indian subcontinent via the land route, right? And the western, like the northwestern frontier, was very, very easily accessible for the Central Asian people, and they took it as an opportunity to come and settle in the northwestern part of the subcontinent, right? This was exactly happening in the same time when the Islam religion was gaining importance, right? So yeah, from the 7th century, we know that Islam was rapidly spreading after the death of Muhammad and all that stuff. And these regions, like when I mean these regions, I am referring to the regions of the northwestern subcontinent, where Arabs and Central Asian people were coming and settling, right? They are often termed as the Islamic world because they are following Islam, right? Okay. Yes, Ayush, Sufism just literally changed India. Yeah, we have like Sufism has like a great importance attached to it. Okay, I'm very tempted to go and explain Sufism right now, but then no, we'll just hold on to that. We'll look about it in detail in the next class, right? Cool. So we'll just quickly have a look at faith of rulers and subjects, right? So again, in the year 711, right, an Arab general named Muhammad Qasim. He's not a ruler of Arab, but he was just like a military general of a Arab king or like Arab prince, right? His name was Muhammad Qasim. He conquered Sindh. I'm hoping everybody knows where Sindh is, right? It's in the northwestern frontier. Just roughly imagine a Indian boundary map in your mind and locate Sindh, right? So that particular region was conquered by a general named Muhammad Qasim in the year 711, which meant that it became a part of the caliph's domain. Again, this caliph in itself is a very broad term or like a broad concept which needs a lot of explanation. But just remember, in order to understand this point, that caliph was the head of Islamic world, right? There's a particular Islamic world and the head of that world is caliph, right? Cool. Yeah, so in 711 that happened, and then slowly Turks started coming in, Afghans started coming into the Indian subcontinent, and they established the Delhi Sultanate. This was happening in like 12, 13, 14 centuries, right? And after that, what happened? This was followed by the establishment of sultanates in the Deccan, right? We know all these Deccan sultanates called as Bijapur, Bidar, Golconda, Ahmednagar, and all these are Deccan sultanates but ruled by Muslim rulers. So we're just looking at a list of Muslim rulers or Muslim dynasties which ruled the subcontinent, right? In 8th century there was Muhammad Qasim, and then there were Turks, there were Afghans, right? Lodi dynasty, Sayyid dynasty and all that stuff. And then there were Deccan sultanates, Bijapur, Bidar, Ahmednagar, Golconda, right? And then finally there were Mughals, right? So these were all the Muslim rulers which kind of controlled the Indian subcontinent at different points of time in history, right? Medieval history, modern history, whatever you want to call it, they controlled at different points, right? So what is the point here? What is the point we're trying to make? You know, like when a king is a Muslim or like he follows the Islam religion, right? The administration also will happen according to Islamic norms, right? So that is the point we're trying to come at. Administration will happen according to the religion of the ruler, right? Since we have a Muslim king, the rules of administration will be according to the Sharia law. Like Sharia law is one of like the greatest law as far as the Islam world is concerned, right? Yeah, so that brings us to the end of the slide. So okay, so moving on, like theoretically, like on paper, Muslim rulers were to be guided by the ulama, right? Again, who is an ulama? Ulama is a scholar of Islamic studies, right? He is a very, very learnt man when it comes to Islamic studies. You know, like he's read all of Quran, he's read all the Sharia laws, like he thoroughly knows what Islamic studies are. People, whoever is an expert in that is called as a ulama, right? If you're referring to like one person, he's called a alim, and plural of an alim is ulama, right? So what was his duty, right? He's supposed to live in live under a king or like a kingdom, and he has to what do you say, like assess whether the governance of that particular kingdom was happening according to the laws mentioned as a part of the Sharia, right? He's supposed to judge it. Like just to give you like an analogy of the 21st century, the judiciary or the Supreme Courts are supposed to have a look on the legislature and the executive, right? They're supposed to see if the politicians are doing their job in an effective manner, are they following the rules mentioned in the constitution, etc., etc. In the same manner, the ulama is the judiciary here, right? He is supposed to supervise the work done by the king and see whether the king is following the rules mentioned as a part of the Sharia law, right? That was the part of the ulama. And theoretically, on paper, Muslim dynasties should have a ulama, right, who were expected to supervise things. But within the Indian subcontinent, the situation was much more complex, right? It was very, very complicated because there were no ulamas in the Indian subcontinent. There was nobody to supervise the king. And in the later chapters, we'll also see that because of the absence of ulamas, the kings to a certain extent did follow Sharia law, but sometimes when they felt that, like whenever it was not feasible for them, they adopted their own new rules, right? So that was because of the absence of ulamas. Again, whatever the population was in the Indian subcontinent, again guys, have to remember this point, the rulers are the Muslims because there was an invasion happening from Arab countries. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the subjects or the citizens of that kingdom are Muslims. No, they are either following the Brahmanical way of life, or they are following Jainism or Buddhism or some local Indian traditions, right? But definitely not Muslim lifestyle. So here the contradiction is the ruler is the Muslim, but the subjects are not Muslims, right? That point should be clearly noted. And it is in this context, right, that, okay, so before actually going on to the point, let me explain this, right? There's a category called Jimmy, right? Jimmy is basically derived from an Arabic word called Jimma, and if you literally translate it to the English language, it means that it is protected, right? So within the Islamic world itself, this word Jimma, this word Jimmi, was used to call people belonging to other religions like Jews and Christians who lived under the Muslim rulership. I was telling you, right, like if king is a Muslim, that doesn't mean all the subjects have to be Muslims. They can be Christians, they can be Jews, they can be Hindus, whatever, right? So people who are not Muslims, if they are living under a kingdom who is a Muslim, right, then they were referred to as Jimmis, right? Again, conceptual, just remember the words because they're really, really important, right? We've looked at 2 words till now, 3 words actually. One is Sharia, which is like the ultimate law which governs the Islamic world, number 1. Number 2 is ulama. He is a scholar of Islamic studies. Number 3 is Jimmi, right? People who are non-Muslims living under the Muslim king, right? So hoping that this point is clear, let's move on to the next slide, which is called as okay, again, explanation needed. There's a tax that Muslim rulers used to levy on the non-Muslim people within his kingdom, right? Only non-Muslims have to pay. Everybody is not supposed to pay. People who are Muslims are exempted from this tax. Only non-Muslims are supposed to pay this tax called jizya to the Muslim king, right? So usually what is the role of the king, guys? We usually, like whenever we look at a king or like a monarch figure, we kind of tend to associate it to, like wars or like something happening external to the kingdom. But that's just not it, right? He also has some internal duties which he needs to perform to look after the people, to maintain law and order within the society and all that stuff. So one of his responsibilities is also to protect his people, right? Like when some other external kingdom is coming to invade this kingdom, the king should be in a position to protect his people, right? So, and that is why people are paying taxes, right? So in the Muslim world, there's a special tax called as jizya, right, which was levied only on non-Muslim rulers, because according to the Muslim tradition, a Muslim king is only supposed to protect a Muslim population, right? Muslim king supporting and protecting only Muslim population. But there are other people now who also need to be protected. So that is why people used to pay a tax called jizya, and in response to it, the ruler offered protection to the non-Muslim populations as well, right? I hope again this point is clear. Okay, guys, I'm hoping the concept is clear because it is a little bit technical and a little bit of conceptual understanding needed. If you all did not understand any of this, please feel free to ask questions in the chat box, right? Okay, just a slight deviation from this. Aditya has a question regarding like 12th standard history. Yes, Aditya, I'll be starting chapter 4 tomorrow, Central Islamic Lands. Yes, I will start. Cool. Okay, coming back to the 12th standard history. No, actually, Ayush, I think you're confused. So, Jimmy is different from Jizya, right, guys? So, there's something called Jimmy. It refers to people, okay? It refers to non-Muslim people living under a Muslim rulership. But there's something called Jizya. You might find this jizya spelling in a different way in a different textbook, right? So jizya is basically the tax levied on non-Muslim people in order to offer protection, right? I'm hoping again it's clear, guys, because we've come across so many Islamic terms, right, today. Okay, cool. You got it, Ayush. Good. Yeah, so that kind of tax was levied on non-Muslim people in order for protection, right? And obviously, in case of the Indian subcontinent, this was extended to Hindus as well, because like generally in the Islamic world, Jews or Christians were the opposing religions, but within India, Hindu was the major opposing tradition, right? So Hindus were also considered under this jizya taxation and all that stuff, right? So according to the Quranic laws or according to the Sharia law, as I was telling you, a Muslim ruler was only supposed to protect the Muslim populations, and he was only the emperor or king of the Muslim populations, right? But as time passed by, when we almost come to Mughals, we'll discuss this in detail. But just remember that Muslims came to regard themselves as emperors of all people and not just Muslims. So you'll see the shift in the dynamic here, right? Because there are no ulamas, Mughals came up with their own rules. Now they started claiming that not just Muslims, but we'll govern and rule over all the people, right? So that is how the dynamic changes because of the lack of ulamas. Okay, so they are ruling, well, good, fair point, but you shouldn't necessarily think that they were harsh on the people, right? Some of the rulers were in fact very, very kind towards non-Muslim people as well, right? For example, people like Akbar or people like Aurangzeb, they had a very tolerant policy towards other religions, right? They in fact respected Hinduism, they in fact respected Jainism, Buddhism and other traditions within the Indian subcontinent, of course they followed Islamic traditions because they are Muslims, but they at least acknowledged the fact that there are other traditions which needs to be respected, right? That type of respect was for sure there. They had a fairly flexible policy towards the subjects, right? If you look at one instance, right, several rulers gave land endowments and granted tax exemptions to Hindus, right? So jizya, like for example, jizya was initially there, but as time passed by, I think almost towards like the Akbar rule, right, like what 16th 17th century, this kind of exemption was tax exemption was granted to the non-Muslim people as well, because kings were considerate, because they were kind towards the non-Muslim people, right? Yeah, they expressed the respect towards non-Muslim religious leaders as well, right? Okay, so I think that fairly gives you a Broadway segment into what the Islamic world looked like, especially within the Indian subcontinent, right? So tomorrow, like in specific, we'll be dealing with another sub-theme within the Islamic tradition, which is called as like not called as, but like popular practices of Islam, right? Like how did the Islam religion run, or like what are the practices adopted by Muslim people and all that stuff. We'll quickly look at that tomorrow's class, right, in the first 20 minutes or so, and then we'll jump into the Sufi traditions. Okay, so that's going to be the structure for tomorrow, not tomorrow, sorry, Friday's class, right? Okay, so with this slide, this brings us to the end of today's class, guys. I'm hoping everybody understood. Again, if you all need a revision of this, I'm very happy to do it, because towards the end we've come across so many Islamic technical terms, right? Jimmi, jizya, sharia, like all these stuff, caliph and all. So if you need a revision, just give me a thumbs up like one session before, so that I can do this revision before actually giving the quiz for this chapter, right? Again, it's totally on you guys. Whatever you all want, you can do, right? Okay, so that officially brings us to the end of the class. Any questions, guys, feel free to put them down in the chat box. I will be very happy to answer them. Yeah. Okay, so in the meanwhile you do that, since it's already past time, I'll try to quickly wrap this up, right? Okay, so about the pitch made earlier about the Unacademy Plus and Iconic subscriptions, there's a special prize offer going on from the 18th of September, which will end by this week, right? It's like a week-long offer, a limited offer, guys. So there's so usually if you use my code TUM10, you'll obviously get a 10% off on the subscriptions. But if you subscribe for a 9-month subscription, not just the 10% by using the code, but like an extra 5% will be offered to you on the 9-month subscription. And in the same manner, like 10 plus 10 offer on the 12 plus month subscriptions. This is a very limited offer, so go grab yours before this one ends. Yeah, cool. So lastly, if you like the content of these videos, please do like it, share it as much as possible, and also subscribe to the channel Unacademy and scholars in particular, right? Yeah, so that is the end. Okay, so Ayush says it's easy. I'm hoping I could deliver whatever the actual content I wanted to, right? Because I know it's very structural, guys. I know it kind of sometimes become very redundant, because we're dealing with a 1 hour class, and sometimes it gets extended to 1 hour 15 minutes or so. So I'm hoping you are able to sit throughout the class and listen to this, and also understand the topics and like comprehend them in very much detail, right? Especially this chapter, right? They're very abstract ideas, like you need a little bit of explanation. That's why we'll be going a little bit slow, right? In fact, we are going a little slow with this chapter. Nonetheless, the ultimate goal is for you to understand, right? I'm hoping everybody is able to understand whatever I'm trying to convey, right? Okay, so that is the end. I do not see any questions in the chat box. I will take that as everything is clear. Yeah. Cool then. So I'll see you in Friday's class at 6 p.m. again to talk about the popular practices of Islam and also Sufi traditions in detail, which is going to be very, very interesting. One of my favorites. So I'm hoping everybody will tune in at 6 p.m. on Friday, right? Also, thank you so much for tuning in today, right? I highly appreciate it, guys, because I know y'all go to your own colleges, struggle there, come back home and again attend the class. So that's a hugely appreciative thing. So thank you so much for that. Cool then. I'll see you on Friday. Till then, have a good evening. Have a good day tomorrow as well, right? Bye, everyone. Bye, Ayush. Okay. Tushar has a question. What's your question, Tushar? Ma'am, suno please. Okay, what is it? Yeah. I'm seeing your chat. Bolo, what's the point, Tushar? Okay, breakup of caliphate and the rise of sultanates. Cool. So now I can't do it because we've already passed like 17 minutes of time. But I have noted this point. I will definitely make sure that I will explain it in the next class, right? Yes, only that topic. Breakup of caliphate and the rise of sultanate. Sultanate as in you're referring to Delhi Sultanate only, no? Or you want me to explain the Deccan Sultanate? Which one, Tushar? Delhi or Deccan? Okay, I'm waiting for your answer. Tushar, is it Delhi or Deccan? Okay, not a problem. We'll get through this one by one. Like, not a problem. Yeah, I know. I know it's class 11. Yeah. Got it. Got your point, Tushar. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So point noted. No, it's not that. The thing is, I haven't come to the fourth chapter yet, right? So once I come there, I'll definitely have a say in that, right? Cool. So, okay, so that brings us to the end of today's class. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in. Again, I'll see you on Friday, right? Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye, everyone.